December 27th, 8:14 a.m. The realtor's SUV was already parked outside when I pulled up. A red bow was tied to the mailbox, still hanging from Christmas morning. The house looked the same. White shutters, fake snowman in the yard, except for the bright staked sign in the front lawn that said sold in black letters. 2 days earlier, my wife whispered to her brother over eggnog, "We'll kick him out after Christmas night." She thought I was asleep. She didn't know the baby monitor in the hallway carried every word straight to my phone. I watched her reflection in the kitchen window that night, wrapping leftovers for his family dinner, while she and her brother texted listings of my own house, the one I bought 5 years before I even met her. Mortgage in my name, deed in mine, taxes paid by me. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. And on December 26th, while they slept in from their champagne hangover, I sent a single email to my attorney. Proceed with liquidation and listing. By the time they woke up, the locks were changed, utilities were redirected, and escrow had already confirmed the buyer's wire. She thought she'd planned the perfect eviction. But when they came to throw me out, what they found instead was the sign that told them everything. The house was gone, and so was I. I didn't respond to her message that morning. She sent one, short and sugary. "Hope you're feeling better, babe." It was her way of smoothing things over before she pulled the plug. I'd seen that tone before, the gentle sweetness before she took something. It started small years ago. My credit card used for holiday gifts, my laptop borrowed by her brother for a short project. She said, "We're family, stop being so uptight." But I'd been raised differently. Everything in my life had to be earned, signed and accounted for. My father used to say, "Never argue, just document." I took that advice too seriously maybe, but it's what saved me this time. The first sign that things were turning came 3 months before Christmas, when I noticed a new car in the driveway on a day I was supposed to be at work. A silver Jeep, plates from out of state. My wife said it belonged to her cousin, but later that week I saw her brother driving it using my gas card. He smirked when I confronted him, said it was a family expense. I didn't fight. I just checked the cameras, printed the footage, and stored it all on a hard drive in my office safe. By November, I'd stopped expecting loyalty. I'd come home to whispers and half-finished dinners, bills piling in the drawer, her brother's shoes at the front door again. Every time I mentioned boundaries, she called me cold. "You don't understand how family works," she'd say. Maybe I didn't. But I understood numbers, timelines, and signatures. So while she decorated the tree and hung stockings, I was gathering statements. Bank, mortgage, utilities, phone logs, every shared account. I traced each payment she'd made to her brother's failed business, a catering company that never existed. When the balance reached $38,000, I knew it wasn't incompetence. It was theft masked as family loyalty. Still, I didn't explode. I cooked dinner, poured her wine, kissed her goodnight. Because when you're building a case, silence is your best weapon. The plan formed quietly. Transfer assets, close shared cards, freeze the joint account, update the deed records, and make sure the equity line she thought she could tap was locked. She believed the house was hers because she decorated it, hosted her family there, and took photos in every corner. But legally, it was mine alone. She just didn't read the fine print. The week before Christmas, she mentioned wanting to update the guest room. Her brother was supposedly moving in for a few months. That's when I finally understood the full scope. They weren't planning to leave. They were planning to remove me. "We'll kick him out after Christmas night," she'd said. And that sentence sealed their fate. I recorded the audio, saved it, and sent it to my lawyer with the subject line, "Proceeding as discussed." That was December 24th, 11:52 p.m. The same night, I drove to my office downtown, shut the door, and signed the final sale contract for the house. The buyers were a retired couple from Arizona who'd been waiting on the paperwork for weeks. They paid in full in cash, direct wire. The escrow office confirmed the transfer on Christmas Day morning. When I came home, my wife handed me a mug of cocoa, acting like everything was normal. "We should make resolutions this year," she said, smiling. "Less stress, more family." I raised the mug and smiled back. She didn't notice that the key to her new resolution was already gone from her own keychain. By Christmas night, the house was full of noise. Her parents downstairs, her brother lounging on my couch, pretending not to see me while eating from the roast I'd paid for. The air smelled like cinnamon and resentment. I watched them from the corner of the dining room, pretending to check emails while I listened. My wife laughed a little too loud, wine staining her lips as she leaned closer to her brother. "It'll be fine," she whispered, thinking no one could hear over the Christmas playlist. "After Christmas night, he's gone. He'll never see it coming." My pulse didn't change. I looked at my phone instead, quietly opening the escrow email. The words were already there in black and white. Funds confirmed. Transfer finalized. Title updated. My name was gone from that property, and so was any leverage she thought she had over me. The irony was perfect. She believed she was setting a trap while I had already removed the floor beneath her. When the family started their toasts, she gestured for me to join. "To fresh starts," she said, her glass raised high. I met her eyes, and for a moment she hesitated. Maybe she saw something, some calm she didn't expect. I lifted my glass too, but said nothing. After dinner, her brother stumbled into my office, holding his glass. "Man, you don't mind if I crash here a while, right?" he said. "We're family." He said that word like a crowbar, meant to pry guilt from me. I smiled. "You already have," I said quietly, and left him standing there in confusion. Upstairs, I packed a small bag, just essentials, passport, laptop, the external drive with all my records. I took one last look around the room we'd shared for 6 years. The garlands on the window, her perfume on the dresser, the red stockings embroidered with our names. She'd left mine hanging crooked. I fixed it out of habit, then turned off the lights. When morning came, I was already in a hotel downtown, checking my account balance and reading her texts stack one after another. "Where are you? Did you take the car? This isn't funny." Then came the call, frantic, slurred with sleep and panic. "The door won't open. Did you change the locks?" I didn't answer. Instead, I forwarded her message to my lawyer, who replied with a single line: "Transfer of possession complete. Tenant access unauthorized." I didn't need to see their faces when they pulled up and saw that red sold sign. I could imagine every second. Her brother's mouth dropping open, her hand trembling on the gate latch. Neighbors pausing on their morning walks. That was the beauty of it. I didn't need to shout, didn't need revenge served loud. Paperwork did the talking. Still, there was a part of me that wanted to see it unfold, so I drove by late that afternoon, windows tinted. They were standing there exactly as I pictured. Her in pajamas under her coat, her brother yelling into his phone, her parents watching from the sidewalk. The Christmas lights still blinked, stupidly cheerful against the cold reality they were facing. She spotted my car but wasn't sure. Her hand went to her mouth. I saw her lips form my name, but I didn't stop. I just kept driving. Later that night, I called the realtor. "They'll probably try to re-enter," I said. She laughed. "Not possible. The new owners are already changing locks." Good. That's when the calm really set in. You'd think I'd feel anger or satisfaction, but all I felt was distance, like I'd been living inside a fog that suddenly lifted. I didn't lose a home. I took back my life. I spent that night walking through the empty downtown streets, Christmas lights flickering in shop windows, and thought about how many warnings I'd ignored. The first one was when she'd told me, "You think too much about money." The second was when she said, "My brother just needs a little help." And the last was her whisper, her final mistake. Because when people show you how they plan to destroy you, the smartest move is not to fight. It's to vanish quietly, leaving them standing in the ruins they built themselves. 2 days later, I got the email from my attorney confirming the escrow transfer had cleared and all documents were filed. The property was officially no longer mine. It was strange, seeing something that had defined my life for years vanish from my portfolio like a deleted file. But I didn't feel loss. I felt strategy. Everything I'd built there had already turned hollow the moment she started staging her family inside it like squatters. What they never realized was how deep I'd prepared for that day. 6 months before Christmas, when her brother's catering company began draining the joint account, I quietly moved everything into separate entities, LLC holdings, liquid funds under my business name, accounts registered in Delaware and Nevada. She never noticed the shift because she never looked at the statements. All she saw were the surface comforts, the Christmas decor, the weekends out, the illusion that I was still financing her world. Meanwhile, I was moving every financial route underground. Even the car in her name was leased through my company, which meant the moment she crossed the line, I could revoke it without a call. And I did. on December 28th while she was still standing in that driveway arguing with the realtor. Her phone would have buzzed with the lease termination notification before she even realized the car key stopped working. It was almost poetic. I'd built that life like a fortress, every invoice, contract, mortgage line, and digital signature in my control. She thought love meant trust. I thought love meant clarity. Turns out both were wrong, but only one of us paid for it. On December 29th, I filed for divorce under irreconcilable differences. The evidence package my attorney attached wasn't theatrical. It was cold, factual, organized. Audio clip timestamp 24/12/2024-23:52, phone record log showing brother 87 calls, credit card expenses linking to non-existent vendors, 3 bank transfers totaling $38,447.12 to a personal account under his name. In court, it would take 5 minutes for a judge to recognize the pattern. Coordinated financial abuse. My attorney called it domestic fraud through kinship manipulation. A fancy phrase for what I'd known all along. They saw me as a wallet with a heartbeat. The hardest part wasn't watching the house go. It was looking back through photos. Those perfectly filtered smiles, her family lined up in front of the same house they were about to betray me for. Every picture now looked like evidence. And maybe that's what marriage had become in the end. A record of transactions pretending to be love. That night, I sat in a small hotel room overlooking the city skyline. The air conditioner hummed and the room smelled faintly of bleach and freedom. I poured a drink, opened my laptop, and started deleting shared cloud folders one by one. Christmas photos, vacations, videos, gone. Every digital tie severed. I didn't block her number yet. Instead, I watched her messages roll in, unfiltered desperation dressed as confusion. Why are you doing this? We can talk. It was just words. Then came the one that made me pause. We don't have anywhere to go. That was the moment I realized how completely they'd built their comfort on me. She had no savings, no assets, no backup plan. Every safety net she thought existed was mine. They weren't just losing a house. They were losing a foundation. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The silence itself was the verdict. A few hours later, she tried calling from another number. My phone lit up with a contact name I didn't recognize, then a voice message. Please, at least tell me why. I listened once. Because you told me your plan, I said softly to the empty room, then deleted it. The next morning, I met my attorney again. He handed me a copy of the finalized property transfer, embossed and stamped. You really want to move everything out of state? He asked. I nodded. Florida, he smirked. Starting over? No, I said. Just starting separate. By January 5th, I'd signed a lease on a high-rise apartment with a view of the ocean, furnished in clean, neutral lines, no sentimental leftovers, no shared memories. It felt like stepping into an upgraded version of solitude. There was no noise, no clutter, no one rearranging my things for better flow. I made coffee at sunrise and watched the waves move in patterns that didn't care who I used to be. For the first time in years, peace didn't feel like a reward. It felt like property I'd reclaimed. Meanwhile, through mutual acquaintances, I heard fragments about her life unraveling. Her brother moving back in with their parents, creditors calling, her social accounts turned private. I didn't smile. I just closed my laptop. I'd already won. Because revenge isn't what you do to someone. It's what they end up doing to themselves once you stop protecting them from consequences. January blurred into February like a long exhale. I spent those weeks rebuilding my schedule from scratch. No shared Google Calendar, no constant messages, no false emergencies about the heater not working or the contractor needing payment. My mornings began in silence now. Black coffee, news headlines, the ocean glowing pale blue outside my balcony. I hadn't realized how much space her noise had filled until it was gone. But quiet didn't mean peace right away. There were still remnants of her everywhere. In the emails from utilities, the insurance accounts she'd never updated, even the scent of her shampoo clinging to my travel bag. I handled each piece the same way I handled the divorce, systematically. One by one, I called every company, filed every closure, rerouted every bill. I'd learned from the past, you don't just walk away. You sterilize the ground you've walked on. Her first legal move came mid-February. My attorney forwarded the notification. Petitioner requests equitable distribution and temporary spousal support. She wanted half of what she called marital property. The irony made me laugh out loud. There was no marital property left to divide, only evidence of what she'd taken. My lawyer prepared a concise response. Respondent contests claim on basis of separate ownership and documented misappropriation. Alongside it, he attached the spreadsheet I'd built months earlier, the same one that tracked every transaction linked to her brother. When he slid it across the table during our meeting, he grinned. "You know, most people come in here crying," he said. "You came in with a ledger." The hearing was set for March 3rd. She showed up in beige, pretending fragile. Her brother came too, in a cheap suit that still had the tag mark on the sleeve. I didn't look at them much. My focus stayed on the documents. The judge scanned through the bank records, nodded once, and said quietly, "Counsel, please note Exhibit D indicates unilateral withdrawal without authorization." Her lawyer tried to object, mumbling something about family loans, but the judge stopped him. Family loans don't include falsified invoices. That was the moment I saw her flinch, not when I walked in, not when she realized I'd sold the house, but when the truth came out on official record. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about exposure. After the session, as we stepped into the hallway, she called after me. "Can we talk just for a minute?" I paused. She looked smaller than I remembered, the performance stripped away. "You didn't have to humiliate me like that," she said. I stared at her. "You did that yourself," I said softly. "I just filed the paperwork." Her eyes darted away and she muttered something about how it wasn't supposed to go this far. But betrayal always thinks it can choose its own depth. I turned and walked off before she could say more. That evening I sat at a bar overlooking the marina. The TV above the counter played a muted news report, and the bartender, an older guy with kind eyes, set down a glass of bourbon. "Rough day?" he asked. I gave a small laugh. "Finalizing a divorce," he nodded knowingly. "Then congratulations. Simple, clean. No pity, no questions. Just acknowledgement." It hit me harder than I expected. In the following weeks, things accelerated. The court denied her request for spousal support, citing misappropriation of assets. Her brother faced a civil claim for fraudulent use of business funds. And through every document, my name appeared in perfect clarity, organized, factual, untouched by emotion. I had followed my father's rule to the letter: never argue. Just document. Around late March, I got a letter from my old neighbor, Mr. Hanley, the one who'd lived across from me for 20 years. Inside was a photo he'd printed, my old house, stripped of its decorations, the sold sign now replaced by a new mailbox and manicured lawn. A different family lived there now, a young couple with 2 kids and a dog. He wrote, "They're happy here. Feels like it's theirs already. Hope you're doing well." I looked at the photo for a long time. That house had been the stage for every lie, every performance, every whisper. Seeing it clean and quiet again felt right. Closure doesn't always come through confrontation. It sometimes comes through absence, but she didn't stop. In April, she sent one more message. Not angry this time, measured, almost polite. "I heard you're in Florida. I hope you're okay. I know I messed up." I didn't respond, but I didn't block her either. I wanted her to see what distance looks like when it's permanent. Every time she texted after that, it came from a new number. I never saved any of them. By June, she stopped trying. Maybe she finally understood that silence can't be negotiated. That summer, I started swimming every morning before sunrise. The water was cold, but it burned away the heaviness. I'd surface, breathe in salt air, and realize there was nothing left of the old life, no debt, no shared accounts, no shadows. Just me. Clean ledgers, quiet mornings, and the knowledge that everything I'd built I still owned. That was the real revenge, not destruction, but recovery. Still, there were nights I'd lie awake and hear echoes of her voice. That whisper replaying like static. "We'll kick him out after Christmas night." It used to sting. Now it sounded like a warning label I'd finally learned to read, because sometimes you don't get betrayed out of malice. You get betrayed out of entitlement. And once you understand that, you stop giving people things they never earned. By late summer, my life had rearranged itself into something unrecognizable but efficient. I downsized everything. My home, my wardrobe, even my circle of contacts. My new condo was a minimalist cube of glass and light. Polished floors, quiet hum of the AC, the steady pulse of the ocean outside. I no longer measured time by someone else's mood swings or the next family favor. I measured it in invoices sent, workouts completed, pages read. Freedom doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like structure returning to a space that had been invaded. Still, the past didn't stay buried. In August, my attorney forwarded a curious email, a new claim from her, this time emotional distress and breach of marital duty. It was a desperate move. She wanted one last payout, one last tug at the sympathy lever, but law doesn't bend for regret. We filed a motion to dismiss within the week, attaching all previous evidence. The court didn't even call a hearing. The judge's note was 2 sentences long. Claim dismissed for lack of merit. Petitioner advised to seek counsel for debt management. That was it. Years of her scheming, her brother's arrogance, their whispered plans all ended in a 2-line footnote of a legal document. But life has a way of circling back when you least expect it. In early September, I attended a real estate investors conference in Miami. The room was filled with people who spoke the same language I did: equity, portfolios, leverage. I was finally among equals again. During a coffee break, a woman approached me, mid-30s, confident, wearing a navy suit and a calm smile. Her name was Claire. We ended up talking for hours about markets, property law, and ironically, divorce settlements. She'd gone through her own version of betrayal, quieter but just as sharp. Her ex had drained their joint account during a supposed business expansion. We understood each other instantly, not romantically but intellectually, the kind of understanding that doesn't need decoration. For the first time, I talked about my past without bitterness. I told her about the Christmas whisper, the sold sign, the way betrayal often looks polite before it turns brutal. She didn't gasp or pity me, she nodded. That's how entitlement works, she said. They think you owe them your stability. She was right. I hadn't realized until then how much guilt had been wired into me. Guilt for having boundaries, for saying no, for walking away. But hearing it reflected back stripped it of its power. After the conference, Claire introduced me to a small circle of investors who were acquiring distressed properties for redevelopment. I started consulting, helping them analyze ownership transfers and protect assets from internal fraud. It was strangely poetic, using the very skills I'd honed through my marriage's collapse to build something clean. Within months, I was earning more than I had in the last 2 years combined. My name started circulating again in the right circles, not as that guy who sold his house under his wife's nose, but as the man who'd built an airtight recovery. And then came the twist I didn't expect. One morning in October, my phone buzzed with a new voicemail. Unknown number, female voice. This is Officer Ramirez from the County Sheriff's Department. We're contacting you regarding an inquiry connected to your former brother-in-law, Michael Peters. Please call us back. I froze, but not from fear, from curiosity. I returned the call. The officer explained that Michael had been arrested for check fraud and unauthorized use of a business account tied to my old address. Apparently, after the fallout, he'd tried running another scam under a different name, but the records traced back to our joint history. My old documentation, those same records I'd filed for court, had now become evidence against him in a criminal case. She asked if I'd be willing to testify to confirm my part in the financial timeline. Of course, I said. And for the first time in years, I smiled at the thought of standing in court again, not as a victim but as a witness of my own precision. When the hearing date arrived, I walked into the courtroom wearing a charcoal suit, holding the same black folder I'd carried through my divorce. Michael was there, older, heavier, his bravado gone. He avoided my eyes. The prosecutor walked through the evidence step by step, fake invoices, email trails, bank transfers. Every number lined up perfectly because I'd kept every receipt. When my turn came, I spoke quietly, directly, just facts. These are the same patterns I noticed in 2024 during my marriage, I said. It's identical behavior. Michael looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. When the verdict came, guilty on multiple counts, I didn't feel triumph. Just closure. That night, my attorney called. You've officially closed the last file tied to that chapter, he said. You're clean. I looked out my balcony window. Below me, the city pulsed in orange light, waves brushing the shore like clockwork. I thought about my wife, where she might be now, what stories she told herself to make sense of what happened. Maybe she blamed me. Maybe she still thought she was the victim. But it didn't matter anymore. I'd stopped living inside her narrative the moment I changed the locks. The whisper that once haunted me now sounded almost absurd. We'll kick him out after Christmas night. They never realized that by planning my removal, they handed me the blueprint for theirs. Every lie they built had a timestamp. Every betrayal had a paper trail, and I'd kept it all. Because when you live by documentation, you don't need revenge. You just need time for the truth to mature. And time, I've learned, is the only asset that always pays interest to those patient enough to wait. By November, I'd built a rhythm so steady that it almost scared me. No chaos, no noise, no crisis waiting at the edge of every morning. Just quiet order and a new sense of control. My old life felt like someone else's tax return. Numbers, signatures, debts that didn't belong to me anymore. Yet sometimes, usually at night, I'd scroll back through archived folders. The old security footage from the house. The audio of that whisper, not out of nostalgia, but to remind myself how close I'd come to losing everything. Betrayal has a strange aftertaste. It lingers not because you miss them, but because your brain keeps trying to understand why. I eventually stopped asking. Some people don't betray out of strategy. They do it out of reflex. Entitlement becomes instinct, and they can't even see it for what it is. A week before Thanksgiving, my attorney reached out again. This time, not about her or her brother, but about the aftermath. Apparently, the new homeowners of my old property had received a letter addressed to me, sent from an unknown P.O. box. The envelope was thick. He scanned it before forwarding it. Inside were 10 printed pages, a handwritten confession from my ex-wife. I read it that night in my apartment under the dim lamp by the window. The first line made me laugh out loud. I finally understand what you were trying to protect. She described everything from her side. How her brother convinced her that the house technically belonged to her, since she'd lived there for years. How she'd believed my patience was weakness. How she'd mistaken responsibility for control. She wrote that after I left, she tried to rebuild, took odd jobs, even worked at a real estate office for a few months, until her name came up during her brother's investigation, and she realized how deep she'd been complicit. The tone wasn't apologetic. It was weary. Like someone describing a storm that had already passed but left nothing standing. The final paragraph said, I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know you were right. Family can be the most expensive investment. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That letter wasn't for me. It was for her. The act of writing it was her final inventory. The emotional one she'd avoided while I'd done the financial cleanup. I folded it neatly and stored it in a drawer with my other documents, under the section marked closed accounts. By December, I'd moved into a new phase of my life, one that revolved entirely around precision and quiet autonomy. My consultancy had grown. I had clients in 3 states, a full remote team, and an assistant who handled most of the logistics. My days were defined by contracts, property appraisals, and secure calls with people who trusted me, because I had one thing they lacked: restraint. I didn't chase drama. I prevented it. It became my signature skill. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same instincts that protected me from my marriage were now my income. In this world, everyone needs a safeguard against the people closest to them. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after that whisper, I sat on my balcony with a glass of whiskey and watched the ocean shimmer under the moon. A soft wind came through, and for a moment, I could almost hear the echo of that night. Her laugh, her brother's voice, the clinking of glasses, and the faint words, "We'll kick him out after Christmas night." It was strange how memory works. The same scene that once triggered adrenaline now felt like a benchmark, the moment my life split into before and after. At midnight, my phone buzzed. A new number again, no name. I didn't plan to answer, but something made me swipe anyway. Hello? Silence at first, then a breath. "It's me," she said. The voice was faint, thinner, cautious. "I know you don't owe me anything. I wanted to say Merry Christmas." I leaned back, eyes on the horizon. "You're still in the same town?" I asked. She hesitated. "No, I had to leave. Too many people know." Her voice cracked slightly. "I sold the last of my things. I'm working at a diner now. It's quiet." I didn't answer for a few seconds. "Quiet's good," I finally said. "You should keep it that way." She laughed softly. "You always like silence more than people." "Maybe," I said. But silence never lied to me. There was a long pause, the kind that feels heavier than shouting. "I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry," she said at last. "Not for what I did exactly, because that can't be undone, but for not understanding you when you were trying to protect us both." Her words weren't rehearsed. They sounded worn, scraped clean of pride. I didn't forgive her. Forgiveness is just another transaction. But I acknowledged the effort. "You did what you knew," I said. "We both did." Another silence. Then she whispered, "Goodbye," and hung up. I stared at the phone, then placed it face down on the table. I didn't feel anything dramatic, just stillness, the kind that only comes after a storm has burned itself out. The next morning, I went for a long drive along the coast. The roads were empty except for the occasional tourist car. The radio played soft jazz, and the world felt freshly washed. As I passed rows of beachfront houses, I noticed a real estate sign planted in front of one. Bold red letters. Sold. The coincidence made me smile. 1 year ago, that word had meant escape. Now it meant continuity, that things keep moving. Properties change hands. Lives reset and value returns to where it belongs. By noon, I stopped at a cafe near the pier. The barista recognized me from local news coverage months earlier, the quiet investor who exposed a family fraud case. She handed me my coffee and said, "Must have been hard, huh?" I shrugged. "Hard was living inside it," I said. "Leaving was the easy part." She smiled in that sympathetic way people do when they see scars they can't fully understand. That night, I started writing something I hadn't touched in years, a personal journal. Not about her, not about revenge, but about patterns, about how manipulation often hides behind kindness, how love without respect is just dependency with better lighting, and how the cleanest revenge is always built on facts, not fury. I titled the first page, "The Cost of Christmas Night." It wasn't for publishing. It wasn't for anyone else. It was just documentation, the language I trust the most. Because in the end, that's all survival really is. Recording what you've learned before someone else tries to rewrite it for you. By February of the next year, the rhythm of my new life had hardened into something that felt almost ceremonial. I woke at 5:30, brewed the same dark roast, read the same financial column, swam the same laps in the pool overlooking Biscayne Bay. It wasn't about habit. It was about reclaiming precision, reminding myself that control once lost could be rebuilt inch by inch. The chaos of my old life had been disguised as warmth, family dinners, spontaneous plans. We're all in this together. Now I could see that all it really was disorder disguised as love. There's nothing colder than being surrounded by people who call your discipline cruelty and your boundaries arrogance. Around that time, I started working with a firm that specialized in asset recovery for small businesses, tracking stolen capital, fraudulent partners, unpaid invoices. I was good at it, better than I expected. I had the kind of patience and skepticism that came only from being burned by people you once fed. Within months, I became their lead consultant. My cases stretched from Miami to Chicago, each one a reflection of the same pattern: trust misplaced, records ignored, emotion weaponized. Every time I opened a new file, I saw her face in some other victim's story. It wasn't revenge anymore, it was maintenance. One evening, as I was reviewing documents at the office, Claire stopped by. She placed a folder on my desk. "You'll want to see this," she said. Inside was a familiar name, Peters Family LLC. My pulse didn't spike this time, it simply steadied. Her brother again. The file showed that after his conviction, he'd tried starting a new venture under a cousin's name. Small loans, false contracts, same pattern. But what struck me wasn't his persistence, it was the listed co-signer, my ex-wife. Somehow she'd been pulled back in, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of desperation. It didn't matter. They were repeating the same loop. "You want to go after it?" Claire asked. I closed the folder. "No," I said. "Let the system finish what it started." For once, it wasn't my job to clean up after them. I'd already paid that bill. Weeks passed, The Florida air grew heavy again, early spring storms rolling in from the coast. My apartment windows rattled at night, and I found it comforting. The sound of wind against something built to withstand it. I'd spent too many years being the structure that cracked first. Now I let the storm test the glass. In March, I got another letter. This time from the Department of Revenue. It was a formal notice stating that restitution from Michael Peters's conviction had been processed. Enclosed was a check, $38,447.12, the exact sum I'd logged on my spreadsheet nearly 2 years ago. The amount was symbolic, almost surgical. I stared at it for a long time before laughing quietly. The universe didn't owe me symmetry, but it gave me that one perfect decimal. I didn't cash it. Instead, I framed it in glass and hung it in my office between my degrees and a quote I'd printed years earlier. Documentation is memory without emotion. Around April, Claire and I began collaborating more closely. We'd work late into the night, our laptops open, the city glowing below us. She had the same quiet ambition I recognized in myself, someone who'd been broken once and learned to rebuild without announcing it. One night, as she packed up her things, she said, "You know, you talk about her like an accountant talks about a closed quarter." I smiled. That's all she ever was. A bad investment that taught me how to audit properly. Claire laughed, shaking her head. "That's cold." "No," I said, "that's balance." But something inside me had shifted too. The anger had evaporated. In its place was a clarity I hadn't expected, an understanding that revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting clean. And I was finally spotless. Then, in May, a mutual acquaintance reached out through LinkedIn of all places, a harmless notification that carried the ghost of my past. He'd run into my ex-wife at a job fair. "She's working admin at a title company now," he wrote. "Seems different. Quieter." I read the message twice and then deleted it. I didn't need the update. But later that night, I caught myself imagining her sitting behind a desk, processing deeds, reviewing ownership transfers, the same language she'd once ignored. Maybe she finally understood what paperwork meant. Maybe she saw now how every line, every clause, every signature carried weight. I didn't wish her ill. I didn't wish her anything. June came, and with it, new contracts, new clients, new cities. My company grew fast enough that I began training others to handle what I used to do alone. I delegated, I trusted, but this time with oversight, with accountability. Every week I'd review the ledgers, clean, balanced, transparent, no hidden accounts, no quiet loans to relatives, no blurred lines between business and sentiment. It wasn't cynicism, it was maturity. One Friday, as I drove back from a meeting, the skyline shimmered against the setting sun. I stopped at a red light and glanced at the mirror. For the first time, I didn't see the man who'd been betrayed, or the one who'd executed revenge with precision. I saw someone unburdened. No pending cases, no ghosts, no whispers. Just a man who'd turned loss into architecture. That night, I returned to the journal I'd started on that last Christmas. The first page had been titled, "The Cost of Christmas Night." Now, on the 50th page, I wrote a new heading, "The Profit of Distance." Underneath it, I wrote, "When they whispered about my eviction, they didn't know they were signing their own release form. When they took my silence for surrender, they didn't know it was record-keeping. When they laughed over the roast that night, I had already filed for peace." I closed the journal, turned off the lights, and sat by the window as the city breathed below. Somewhere, she was probably starting over again, and that was fine. People, like her, always do. They reinvent until someone else catches the bill. But she wouldn't find another me. The kind of man who listens quietly while others dig their own hole, who keeps every receipt, who turns betrayal into strategy. I didn't destroy her life. I audited it. Outside, the rain started tapping the glass again, steady and rhythmic, like a metronome marking time between who I was and who I'd become. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just free, I was finished. July bled into August with the weightless calm of someone who no longer owed explanations to anyone. The business expanded faster than I could manage on my own, but I'd learned to delegate and verify rather than rescue and absorb. My staff respected me because I didn't micromanage, I simply audited. Trust but record, I'd tell them the way my father used to tell me. Every Thursday we'd run silent audits. No talking, just data. It wasn't about paranoia. It was about precision. I'd come to believe that order was a form of peace. Numbers don't lie, people do. One night, after a long meeting with an investor, I found myself walking through downtown Miami near the marina. The air was thick, humming with the scent of salt and hot metal, and the neon reflections danced across the water like scattered files, beautiful, chaotic, and temporary. I passed a restaurant, and a group of people were laughing loudly at a corner table. It hit me like déjà vu, the sound of comfort before betrayal. I stopped for a moment, watching them raise their glasses, one man joking, "We'll figure it out after the holidays." The same phrase. I almost smiled, because now I knew how dangerous after the holidays could be. It's the kind of phrase people use when they're postponing confrontation until they believe they've secured the win. I walked away calm. I didn't belong to that world anymore. Back at my apartment, I found an email waiting from an unknown address with no subject line. Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was short, just a few lines. "I saw you in the news again. You look different, stronger. I'm glad you made it out." See, there was no attachment, no manipulation this time, no apology. Just acknowledgement. It didn't take me long to realize it was her. The C wasn't for Claire. It was the first letter of her name, the one I hadn't spoken out loud in over a year. I didn't reply, but for a second I thought about that first Christmas night. The way she'd smiled while handing out gifts, her hand brushing mine as she whispered plans to evict me from my own home. I remembered the taste of the bourbon that night, the hum of the heater, the way betrayal didn't scream, it whispered. For the next few days, her message lingered in the back of my mind, not like an open wound, but like a scar you occasionally rub to confirm it's still there. I told Claire about it later during one of our late-night work sessions. She leaned back, studying me. "Did it bother you?" she asked. "No," I said, "but it reminded me of who I used to be." "That's good," she said. "You need reminders, not regrets." We'd built something quiet between us, nothing dramatic, no declarations. Just mutual respect, long hours, shared silences that didn't feel heavy. Some nights we'd talk until dawn about systems, about human flaws, about how easily emotion corrupts reason. She'd say, "You treat feelings like liabilities." I'd answer, "Because they usually are." She'd laugh, but there was warmth in those conversations, a steady current of understanding that didn't need to be labeled. In September, our firm landed a major government contract, auditing misappropriated relief funds from post-hurricane reconstruction. Millions of dollars lost in paperwork, corruption buried under family businesses and partnerships. It was personal déjà vu, scaled up. As I combed through files, one case caught my attention. A property in Tampa listed under an LLC where the manager's name was strikingly familiar. Not hers, but her cousin's. The same cousin who'd vouched for her brother years ago. The paper trail smelled of the same pattern. Ghost invoices, false receipts, overlapping signatures. I didn't interfere directly. I simply compiled the report, flagged the inconsistencies, and submitted it to the Federal Review Board. Within weeks, the contract was frozen, and the audit team reported systemic internal fraud. I didn't need to know the names that followed. Life had a way of finishing unfinished business without my help. That night, I drove to the beach. It was past midnight. The tide was high, the wind cutting across the empty sand. I took off my shoes, walked to the edge, and let the cold water climb my ankles. There was something ritualistic about it. One last audit, not of numbers, but of self. I went through every chapter in my head. The betrayal, the paperwork, the silence, the rebuild. There was no anger left, no triumph, just a clear ledger. Around October, Claire and I attended a business gala. It was one of those sterile high-end events where every smile is calculated. Midway through the evening, a man I vaguely recognized approached me. He was in his 50s, tall, slightly nervous. "You're Ryan, right?" he asked. I nodded. "I used to work with your ex-brother-in-law." Small world. He laughed awkwardly. "He used to brag that he'd found a way to make you pay for everything." "Guess that didn't age well." I smiled politely. "No, it didn't." He hesitated, then added, "You know, people still talk about how you handled it. Quiet, professional, no drama." That's rare. I shook his hand. Drama's expensive, I said. Documentation's cheaper. He laughed, but there was something in his eyes, respect, maybe envy. When I got home that night, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. I didn't recognize the man staring back. The tired, reactive version of me had vanished. What stood there now was something sharper, measured, impossible to manipulate, the kind of man who'd learned to weaponize calm. In November, exactly 2 years since the night of that whisper, the city skyline glowed orange over the bay as I finished writing the final page of my journal. It wasn't closure, I'd stopped chasing that word long ago. It was documentation of endurance. I'd built a life out of everything they tried to take. Every house payment, every credit line, every betrayal. They'd all been converted into structure, wisdom, policy. My revenge had evolved beyond punishment. It had become an ecosystem. One morning, while cleaning my desk, I found the old flash drive labeled Christmas Audio. I hadn't played it in nearly 2 years. For a moment, curiosity won. I plugged it in, pressed play. The familiar crackle of background noise, laughter, clinking glasses, and then her voice, low, confident, whispering, "We'll kick him out after Christmas night." I listened to it once, then twice. The first time I'd heard it, it broke something inside me. Now it sounded almost comical, like the voice of a stranger trapped in a bad plan. I hit delete, watched the file vanish from the screen, and felt something unclench in my chest. That afternoon, I locked the office early and drove inland, far from the coast, into the quiet stretches of road where palm trees give way to flat land and dust. I rolled the windows down, let the warm air rush in, and thought about how simple freedom really was. Not forgetting, not forgiving, just being unreachable. Because when people build their power on your patience, the cleanest form of revenge isn't to retaliate. It's to disappear so completely that your existence becomes their silence. And somewhere out there, I knew she still thought of me. Not as the man she planned to kick out, but as the one who walked out long before she realized she'd been evicted from his world. By December, 2 years and 12 days after that night, I found myself driving past the place where it all started. The neighborhood was cleaner now, the lawns trimmed, the air heavy with pine and winter rain. I slowed the car as I passed my old street, not out of longing, but curiosity. The house still stood there, but it wasn't mine, not hers, not anyone's from that life. It belonged to a quiet family now. There was a tricycle in the driveway, 2 chairs on the porch, and soft yellow lights glowing through the windows. The world had moved on without any of us, and that, I realized, was the purest justice possible. I parked for a minute across the street, watching. No ghosts came out. No memories tried to drag me back. Just a simple, silent peace. I thought about the man I'd been the night she whispered those words. Someone too polite to interrupt, too trusting to see the scheme unfolding behind a smile. That version of me died when the sold sign went up. What replaced him wasn't colder, just clearer. I learned that revenge isn't fire or fury. It's balance sheets, signatures, and boundaries drawn in ink, not tears. I learned that quiet doesn't mean weak, that calm can dismantle cruelty faster than rage ever could. And I learned that sometimes the only way to win is to let them believe they've already won, right up until the moment the locks change. I sold everything tied to my past. Furniture, clothes, photos. I even sold the watch she gave me, the one engraved with "Always Us." I replaced it with a blank-faced one. No engraving, no promise, just time, my time. No one else's. The money from the sale I donated anonymously to a shelter for people starting over after financial abuse. It felt fitting. You can't return stolen years, but you can buy someone else a beginning. Tonight, as I record this, it's Christmas Eve again. The city outside my window hums with the sound of parties, families, laughter, familiar echoes that no longer sting. I pour a drink, look out at the skyline, and feel nothing but steadiness. The same night that once broke me now just marks another line on the calendar. I made peace with what happened by understanding that not every story needs forgiveness. Some just need documentation, closure, and silence. So when people ask me if I ever saw her again, I tell them no, and that's the point. She doesn't exist in my world anymore. She's a lesson wrapped in a whisper I turned into a future. The truth is, I didn't just rebuild. I audited every piece of my life, and this time the numbers finally balanced. I'll leave you with this. When someone shows you who they are, don't argue. Don't explain. Just record it, and when the time comes, act. Quietly, completely, permanently. What about you? Have you ever walked away from someone who thought they could break you and still found peace on your own terms? And tell me, where are you watching this story from tonight?